Of the LEGO adaptation games, Indiana Jones is one of the most overlooked these days. Granted, there are some justified reasons for that. It only had 2 titles, and none since 2009 with the release of the second game, so younger or newer fans of these games are much more likely to have missed it. Side note, LEGO Indy 2 is actually the most recent Indiana Jones game in general as of this video. Something I alluded to with Assassin's Creed of all things. Between the cool hat, the whip, and the series' typical ancient artifact hunt that goes on mid-game, this is honestly one of the best Indiana Jones games in the last decade. Much to my shame, there is a typo on screen, though it sort of adds to the joke on a weird level. Back to the point though, Indiana Jones is just a weirder fit for the LEGO franchise, because it broadly goes against the kind of stuff they usually produce, especially back then. It's chock full of fairly graphic depictions of violence and death. There's tons of religious iconography, and military vehicles, which are usually a huge no-no for the company per the founder Olkert Christensen's wishes. These movies have people fucking. There are Nazis. Sometimes people fuck the Nazis and then discover that his father had already fucked the same Nazi, and then he's like, oh no, my penis was in the same Nazi vagina that my father's penis was inside of. Even besides that stuff, Indiana Jones is a much more mundane series than the LEGO games usually cover, barring the moments where various deities are teaching the children watching new levels of trauma, mind you. Usually, these games are all superheroes, and space wizards, and transphobic wizards. Indy is a comparatively normal dude. He's vulnerable to bullets, he loses fights, and he routinely fails at his plans at about the same rate he succeeds at them. It's the juxtaposition that makes his games so memorable in hindsight. But we're not looking at that version today. We're getting even further into the weeds, cutting through the, jungle underbrush or something. Shush, segues are hard. Today we're looking at the Nintendo DS version of LEGO Indiana Jones, The Original Adventures. See, I have quite the interest in the various handheld ports of these games. I've played a decent number of them, even owning every LEGO title over on the PlayStation Vita. Very sorry to every lady and gentleman whose undergarments just fled your crotch at high velocity due to this flex, but I am married. The handheld versions, most often created by TT Fusion, semi-separately from the main team at TT, the original, and their console versions, really have to strike a very tricky balance, at least for people in my specific shoes. Too similar to the main version, and they lose much of the appeal of playing a second version. But if they get too different, they risk losing the broader appeal of these games in the first place. Then, on top of that, there's the extra hurdle of weaker hardware that was inherent to handheld devices in the first place. It would be very easy for this stack of cards to topple. In fact, I've covered one such case already. LEGO Star Wars the video game from 2005 on the Game Boy was not really up to the task. It's a weird little game. You can check out that video if you're curious. So skipping over the other LEGO Star Wars entries that happened in between, at least for now, how did Indiana Jones hold up? Spoiler alert, pretty damn well. I'd personally rank this one pretty high on the handheld rankings. There's absolutely some jankiness carried through the TT Fusion ports, and this one is no exception. Sometimes the collision detection with interactive objects misses unpredictably. The combat ends up a bit clunkier than the main versions. They also far more frequently use illegal building techniques, pieces that don't exist, or even objects that appear to be natural material instead of LEGO plastic in the first place. It's far from experience ruining, but most people are going to notice at least some of this stuff. However, rough around the edges honestly doesn't feel immersion breaking for the Indiana Jones license. If you're paying close attention, sometimes a wall moves like a tarp, or a heavy stone block bounces like a rubber ball, but it takes more than that to break the magic of the experience. Similarly, This game is still a weird port at times, but only in a way that still works for the overall experience. There are a few extra points of note that arise from playing this on modern hardware instead of the original device. On my DS Lite, thanks to the size of the screen and the layout of the buttons and the touchscreen, certain elements do feel more comfortable or more natural. This game plays great on the native hardware, and so that is still my preferred way to play, and my first recommendation if it is a possibility for you. However, my DS Lite cannot record footage, so I emulated through my Odin for the footage. There are some nice benefits through this method. My emulator lets me see the layout as I see fit. Personally, I like to shrink down the touchscreen on one side, rather than the awkward methods of forced verticality, like I had to do back when I covered Altair's Chronicles a few years ago, or just having half of my widescreen footage taken up by a screen with very low visual activity if I did them horizontally at the normal size. The extra buttons also allow me to switch around screens instantly, and I could even set up features like fast forward or quick saves if I were so inclined. I can even tilt the device sideways when it's essential to see the screens oriented properly. Playing as I am does have some downsides too though. The larger, higher quality screen does reveal some visual issues you won't notice on the DS, and the screen layout change sometimes becomes very obvious, which I will discuss later. The crux is that some complaints aren't necessarily fair to level at the game, so I'll only bitch about them when I find them sufficiently amusing. Jumping right in, and oh my god, that head is too small. Look at that thing. They messed up the Lego proportions. They didn't even have to aim for realistic human proportions and they still fucked up. Sometimes the camera angle or the common presence of wide-brimmed hats helps to mask this, which is sort of worse, because then the tiny heads end up shocking you again out of nowhere later on. Like, goddamn, this was my first impression, and now it has to be yours too. The game design for this port is very willing to set out and do its own thing, compared to the console version. The levels mostly cover the exact same scenes, although some of the vehicle-heavy scenes had to be rearranged a smidge due to system limitations, so it's not quite one-to-one. It's not necessarily a bad thing, though. The young indie scene in Last Crusade, which just had to get relegated to bonus level on console, gets to open Last Crusade again, since a later level had to simplify some vehicle stuff into one composite level. The bigger difference comes in playing these scenes, because in addition to unique level layouts, the abilities and the puzzles are very overhauled. It's probably faster to name the character types that didn't change. The whip still works identically, swinging over pits, pulling objects closer and disarming enemies. Excavation characters still dig up buried items. Children can still climb through small access tunnels. Characters with special access panels are both simplified, yet also expanded, but still work in the same broader vein where certain allegiances get to use certain panels. I'll cover these shortly. Explosive characters, technically, still exist, but pretty nerfed. The bazookas have the absolute worst auto-aim in the game, and there are no special bricks they destroy, as the only explosive bricks in the game are invulnerable to them, somehow. We'll get back to those. The other original abilities aren't. They just don't exist here. Women get nerfed the hardest. In the main version, women have a higher jump by default, which is gone. Willie Scott's glass-shattering scream is also gone. Not woman-centric, but the mechanics and their broken machinery are absent as well. There are no random animals for phobias or to serve as mounts, and likewise, no stray monkeys for banana-based economics. There are new abilities replacing those. Marion has the power of alcohol. Like, they don't call it that, but it's canonically booze. She has bottles that burst when thrown at a fire source. Water don't do that. Marion also gets the monkey from the Cairo scene in Raiders, which can climb up vines, several years before the similar pets ability existed in the Turf Wizard games. It's a bit weird here. Instead of just releasing the monkey wherever she sees fit, a euphemism that also explains why I'm banned from a far too conservative Starbucks out in Richfield, Utah, it only works in predetermined locations, where she turns into the monkey. This keeps happening even after the monkey is canonically dead. Marion Ravenwood gets Animorph necromancy powers. I take it back. Women have not been nerfed. Zombie monkey shapeshifting is the best ability in the entire goddamn LEGO series. Academic characters, and also Willie Scott, are also given umbrellas, which they can use to go down zip lines. Frustratingly, they can't do it until the base plate is built, even though the zip line is already there. I did find it weird that Willie appeared to be the only non-academic character with an umbrella, so I decided to test her at an academic access point, and unsurprisingly, she is useless. Worse, because I picked her to test this out in a level, it took the spot of a thuggy character I needed for a different access panel, and I had to play it again. Following. Let's look at those access panels a little deeper, as this version gets pretty heavily centered around these, especially once you hit free play. Enemies, i.e. the ones who are Nazis but just can't be called that, switch out military checkpoints for radio installations. Thuggies switch out big statues for little statues. Academics have spots marked by scrolls instead of hieroglyph memory puzzles. And new to this version, the Brotherhood of the Cruciform Sword... brothers have their coat of arms. Each one has a unique touchscreen minigame. Nazis have to dial in a brick code. Thuggies find the right brick in the dark with a torch. Academics have to flip around in their journals to find the right brick. And brothers have to identify grails marked by bricks. They all feel appropriate for each group, though I'm not sure how this or that actually translate into what the character is doing on the panels for real. Though, for the LEGO series, it's less of an issue since the game worlds often operate on rather insane troll logic in the first place. There's one other ability you have to use throughout, but it's not an ability the characters have. It's your ability. It's your blowing ability.
Oh, yeah.
You see, sometimes on the Nintendo DS, they would incorporate the built-in microphone for certain tasks. Technically, this is also something I saw back in Altair's Chronicles, though it is much more common here. Here, anytime you come up next to a fire source, or a raft, or a fan to lift the characters. This game asks you to blow it. I have never seen so many requests to blow something out of a video game. Thankfully, since I was emulating, I can just map one of the buttons on there to do the blowing for me. So now, I just have a blow button at my command. Jesus Christ, I cannot be trusted with this power. The levels mostly use these abilities in various combinations for the main gameplay loop, as you would expect from any LEGO title, but they do a good job keeping them mixed up in clever and original ways to keep it from feeling too samey. Like the other LEGO titles of the day, platforming is reliable enough, only murdering you unfairly about, like, 10% of the time? Maybe even less. The obstacles are varied and are right at home for what you'd see on console, with death traps, platforms moving over lava, one guy tries to Donkey Kong your ass into the grave, that sort of thing. Water is, bizarrely, always used for instant death, and even weirder, the 2 times snakes are the environmental hazard. They also just flooded the snake pits with water. First of all, that makes them eels. Second, why is the Well of Souls filled with water? It is in the middle of the desert. Otherwise though, level design generally pleased me. They took good care to make sure the environments were fun to navigate, and had enough to discover to give it that adventure feeling. The levels are pleasingly detailed with a large variety of objects to smash, and even though animal mounts are no longer a thing, they occasionally included a camel or an elephant, just for flavor. There were also fun moments that surprised me. One such moment has a bridge breaking underfoot, dropping me into a pit to get ambushed by mummies. I also really liked a moment where swinging across a gap sent a convoy truck sliding down behind me. That's some Uncharted shit in the best possible way, and it's very impressive seeing them do this on the Nintendo DS. Freeplay actually really helped double down on the feeling of discovery. Typically for these games, the areas locked to freeplay are individual rooms sealed off with a collectible, but this game would sometimes have secret rooms within secret rooms. So I legitimately never knew quite what to expect, and I love that. The level in Nepal, for example, only lets you access the inside of the huts if you think to jump into the chimney while on the roof. Most of these are literally just to add atmosphere and a few extra studs, which really makes it feel a little closer to being a real village. If you know the console games though, you'll probably recognize what they're setting up. One hut, in a hidden area, in fact, has the Santa Claus Easter egg like its big sister port.
I promptly murdered Santa.
There are also Star Wars Easter eggs, like the main games, except some of these are even unique, like the opening level's jungle hiding a treetop village with an Ewok revealed at the end. There's also Luke in the ice cave, but literally nothing I did saved him, so I guess he just has to perish there. Vehicle scenes are a bit more mixed. Thankfully, the convoy levels in Raiders and Crusade, which were my favorites back in the day, get reasonably close adaptations to the main game, where you jump from truck to truck. The others, though, are stuck to an overhead perspective, rather than how the main version mostly has you jumping in and out of vehicles in levels scaled up for such activities. And instead of successfully getting to an end point, they just slap a timer on you and tell you to do your best until it times out. It's a bit lackluster. These are designed with both screens in mind and suffer the most from emulation. Because of the DS's landscape, there's an implied gap to leave space for the hinge, and you just sort of have to do your best to mentally approximate that timing. It definitely plays better on the real device, but even then, I still just don't love these. Most of these don't let you turn around the other way and demand a pretty fast response time if you actually want to get the collectibles in the level. They're still not horrible, and it is better to have these scenes in some form rather than not at all, but these take the system downgrade the hardest.
Editor Charlie, just adding one quick thing in that I forgot to specify during the pre-recorded portion. The vehicle levels do have the most level exclusivity in the game, as certain events like sliding down the mountain in the raft in Temple of Doom, or actually flying the plane outside of a cutscene in Last Crusade, are unique to this version of the game.
I do have a few remaining design gripes, but they are pretty minor. Cutscenes are compressed to a truly ugly degree. While it was probably inevitable, my eyes wanted to bleed just a little bit, and even more so on the larger screen. There's also a barely noticeable thing on the original screen that becomes a far more noteworthy issue with more visibility. Changing between characters in freeplay leaves brief moments of nightmare fuel texture warping. Character designs sort of cheat a little more than usual. Indy straight up has his bag's strap printed on his torso, with the bag just miraculously glued to his side, and some characters go so far as to have printing on the back of their hips, which LEGO does not do on official minifigures. One bizarre design philosophy occurs throughout the game, where if you are standing up on a ledge, it almost always leaves an arc of studs to try and make you fucking jump off. While these always, technically, can lead you to a safe landing spot, these frequently happen right above precarious drops, so if you haven't done it with the precise momentum or direction, you'll just end up losing more money dropping to your death than you gained. This feels like schmuck bait, and some designer knew exactly what they were doing. The character select feels unnecessarily strict, because as mentioned, if you pick someone who doesn't have an ability, or in Willie's case, has one ability that's typically associated with a second ability, your free play slots kick out someone else you will need. While this is likely a system or development timing thing, putting a hard cap on how many characters can be accessible within a level, I do really wish they had fixed this, as it means you have to limit yourself to play efficiently. So things like custom characters, or this knight with the biggest motherfucking sword, have to be overlooked. Finally, all of the characters just recycle LEGO Star Wars voices. If you know that game, it's distracting here. Especially when they clumsily stick the death noises over the cutscenes where they clearly don't match up.
Hi. Apparently, Editor Charlie cannot catch a break. Through the power of time travel, I will let you know you will be seeing me again later. Didn't forget anything this time, but I did make a discovery while watching the cutscenes to pick which one would work best for that last bit. I noticed an addition to this one. I'll play it again, just in case you missed it. Someone added a fart. Not in the console game. They added an exclusive fart to the Nintendo DS version.
I already mentioned combat is a bit clunky in the TT Fusion ports, and while that's true here, it's never horrible and certainly doesn't ruin the experience, mostly because it's pretty good at keeping enemies in their lane. Sure, whip disarms don't always register the first time, enemies could probably die a little bit faster, and ranged attacks feel a bit weak due to iffy auto-aim and the fact that you'll automatically switch to melee when in close range to an enemy, which happens frequently due to somewhat smaller level size, but these are more quibbles than outright complaints. There is actually one element that uplifts the combat by a degree. In the console game, ranged weapon pickups have limited ammunition, like real guns. Here, you have unlimited ammo, but you lose any weapons picked up upon death, so you have one extra incentive to try and not die. I often found myself strategically switching to the character without the weapon to save it for later, so it did help keep me a touch more invested in combat. There was a rare combat occurrence that ended up being more of a humorous thing than an issue due to the lax consequences of death in these games. You know how when you're playing a fighting game and someone gets you trapped in a combo where they get several hits in and you can't escape because it stun locks you between strikes? Every once in a while, the bad guys here fucking do that and hit you with an inescapable 4-hit combo that naturally kills you on the spot. It only really stung if it made me lose a weapon. Most times, I was just sort of impressed they had that sort of skill. Collectibles are also changed around. Red bricks function more like LEGO Star Wars than the main port. You don't have to cart a parcel back to a mailbox, you just have to find it. These still unlock extras, except sometimes they unlock touchscreen minigames, so it's a bit narrower of a list of extras than we usually get. The stud multipliers times 2, 4, 6, and 10. Fuck number 8. Fast build, regenerating hearts, one-hit kills, and invincibility. They're the most essential inclusions, but something to skip the access panel minigames, and some of the wacky ones would have been nice. Maybe like a big head mode, or a normal head mode. The point is, I would have preferred the minigames not taking up so many of the red bricks. Instead of mini-kits looking like treasure chests, they're actually a golden idol, unique to this game.
You lied to me.
Finding all of these doesn't actually build a model, but they do still unlock trophies to look at, such as the fertility idol, a crocodile, or a forklift. Huh. There's a third new collectible, treasure maps, and you have to collect all 3 hidden in each level. This could be cooler, but it just unlocks one of the 10 gold idols, so it feels more like a filler item than a distinct collectible. Like, now you have to find 12 mini-kits instead of 10. If these had unlocked something distinct, such as the touchscreen minigames, they could have fixed 2 complaints with 1 stone. The cast of characters is relatively close to the main port. Unlike the later handheld versions of LEGO Batman 1 and 2, which arguably have so many extra characters in the roster to make it one of their main draws, there aren't really a ton of extra characters in the original Indiana Jones trilogy that were missing. This game does add in, a clown, though. His head is an illegal build in multiple ways, and he has a shovel, presumably to bury the bodies. If you are coolrophobic, I am very sorry. If you are coolrophilic, however... Look, I know Baneshakes Charlie is one of the clownier YouTubers you can find, but guys, I'm married. We've been over this.
Editor Charlie, again, because I forgot to specify something, again. There are a few noticeable character design differences in this one that I think go back to an earlier prototype stage. Marion in particular has a lighter brown hair, something you can even see on the box art for the original game, but something that did not make it into the final game or even the physical sets released as well. Additionally, in Willie Scott's dress where she's the singer, there is a big scribbled question mark. I'm assuming this is not foreshadowing for the Riddler in LEGO Batman coming out next. This appears to be placeholder textures for the back of the character. Not sure what else it would be. Just thought it was interesting.
Finally, a quick look at the touchscreen minigames. Some are just tangrams, which are personally take it or leave it. And then there are all of the access panel minigames again, since you clearly didn't get enough of them in the levels. But on the good side, there are a shuffleboard 2-player game and a drag indie behind the truck challenge that are more engaging, though these two also suffer from the same screen issues as the vehicle levels when emulating. Most amusingly of all, they created several cooking minigames out of the gross-out dinner scene from Temple of Doom, where you're properly pan-searing beetles or chilling monkey brains. Mola Ram is wearing a chef's hat, glaring at you like Gordon Ramsay. It's the best kind of refuge in audacity. I've probably squeezed as much content out of this port as can be reasonably expected for this video. I typically do a story rundown in my game coverage here, but since it's the same broader strokes of the very well-known movies, I don't think I'm adding anything extra to the experience by just recapping that. These levels are honestly going to be best enjoyed played, so that's my recommendation. This port definitely wouldn't quite replace the main game, but by the numerous gods that keep murderizing people violently in these things, it is a damn fine experience in its own right, and I can't recommend it enough.